On behalf of the Canopus TRIAD organization, I'd like to welcome you to our Sheriff's Candidate Forum today. My name is John Hobart, and I will serve as your moderator today. I think for those who don't know me, I'm a 41-year educator, retired, enjoying retirement, love to do yard work and garden and stuff like that. So that's who I am. My wife is Julie. We're pretty active in the senior center, and I'm active in TRIAD. Expectations, I want to talk a little bit about that before we start the forum today. They are that you're present to get a better understanding of the platforms of each of our sheriff candidates for Goodhue County. Hopefully when you leave the forum, you'll have a better understanding of the candidates and where they stand on important issues to Goodhue County and to you in order to make you cast an informed decision at the polls on November 8th. That's why we're putting this on. At no time during the forum will attendees be allowed to disrupt today's proceedings with personal opinions or accusations or arguments. If we run into that problem, which I hope we don't, I'll be gaveling you. And the second gavel, we may ask you to leave. So we're here to inform, not argue. Expectations are you will gain from hearing our candidates answer questions chosen by TRIAD during today's forum. And the questions were sent out to Marty and Josh prior to this forum, so they had a chance to look at them and prepare accordingly for today. At the end of the forum, we'll have about 15 minutes of open questions from you. And at that time, I'll ask you to stand, identify yourself, and ask your question. And then they'll respond to it, and there'll be no response between the two of you. Any questions on that? We want to make this real courteous and informal at the same time as being constructive, not destructive. So before beginning our public forum, TRIAD wishes to thank both Sheriff Marty Kelly and Josh for being here, and they responded immediately upon our request. They were looking forward to coming, both of them. When I get to the questions, everybody, we're going to alternate the questions. To make it fair, we're going to flip a coin here, and I'll ask that person to respond first, and then we'll just go back and forth, so not one person starts the answering the questions every time. So with that, Marty, I'll ask you to call in the air. Tail. It is a tail. Okay, so Marty will start, and then we'll come to you, Josh, after that. We'll go back and forth. Question? Up to 5 minutes to respond to the questions I asked. If they go shorter, we'll be able to get more questions in. So we'll see how that goes. Candidates will rotate, as I mentioned, to respond first on each question chosen by the moderator. We'll have time for about 4 questions at least, I hope, and if they give shorter answers, we can move more questions, okay? So we'll depend on that a little bit. Questions from those attending will be addressed for approximately 15 minutes following the end of my questions. And each candidate will have the opportunity to respond to your questions for 3 minutes. So we can get, a few questions in that thing. So with that, the questions, I'll start with you, Marty. And we can use the microphone or not. I don't know, maybe both their voices are strong enough. Should we use it? Okay. We'll just pass this then around. Our standalones weren't working, so couldn't get that to work today. Okay. So Marty, the first question is, why are you running for Goodhue County Sheriff?
Well, thank you, John. Thank you, TRIAD members and some citizens here. Well, first off, I'm Marty Kelly. I'm the Goodhue County Sheriff. I've been in law enforcement I've served in law enforcement in 5 decades. I know I don't look that old, but I just happened to start in the late 80s and it's the 2020s now. But, so 5 decades and I've seen a lot of change. Why I'm running, I told this story at the last forum I had, and it was actually my ending, but I'll begin with it. When I was in college, or prior to that, I never wanted to be in law enforcement. It was never on my radar. My family wasn't involved in law enforcement. I went to college and I was interested in the rec park and recreation area of it. I majored in that until I was a junior, and then my advisor said, Marty, you need to have a minor. You're going to be done with your major pretty soon. So I picked law enforcement just as a minor on a whim. And the first couple of classes I took, I was sold. I don't know why I was sold. It sounded interesting to me. But here's what happened. Back in the late 80s, there was thousands of people looking for jobs. I was competing against 1,200 people out of St. Paul, and I didn't, it took me 1 year to get hired in Red Wing, in my hometown, which I'm very proud of. I worked there for 29 and a half years as a law enforcement officer. In one of my first days, it was a first week into our field training program, and then my partner and I responded to a medical where a male was unconscious. And we arrived, he was clearly in cardiac arrest, the spouse was there, there's young children in the house. And we performed CPR until the medics arrived, and he ultimately died. That was my first week, and my parents can attest. I went home and cried at the supper table. I did not know what I was getting into. Until a week later when I got a thank you card from the spouse saying, thank you for everything you did. I know we lost my husband, but for you and your partner to spend, I think we probably spent well over an hour with her after he died. She said, for you to spend that time with us, it made all the difference in the world. We can't bring my spouse back, but you made a difference in our lives. And that's why I'm in law enforcement today. I've made a difference starting out in my career. I have many, many stories over 34 and a half years, or 33 and a half years, just like that. And I keep those cards. I have her card in my desk today to remind me that that's why I'm in law enforcement. That's why I'm running for sheriff. And another reason. So that's that story. That's why I'm here. What I'm proud of being here and being and serving as your sheriff, I tell this once in a while. This is a flyer from 2018 when I ran for sheriff. This flyer sits on my desk under my computer screen to remind me of what I promised you in 2018. You know, you hear campaign promises all the time. Half of them don't come to fruition. I had 5 campaign promises on this flyer, and I'm humbled to say every one of those we've accomplished in the last 4 years. Another reason I'm running, some of those programs that we started take longer than 4 years to even get going. So I'm here to finish what I started, continue to do what I said I was going to do. All of you got this because I mailed it to you 4 years ago. So you know what I promised people. And I'm gonna, since I have 5 minutes, John, unite citizens and law enforcement. That was the #1 thing that I had. And I don't think anybody here in this TRIAD community can say we haven't done that. I've got a community engagement coordinator now. From 2020, I got a federal grant allowing us to have that person. Just for that reason, community engagement. We have done that. We have been at TRIAD. Rosie said it. She's coming next week to talk about, or next month to talk about fraud. We do that all over the county, not just for TRIAD, but for citizens in churches, senior centers, all over the county. We're doing that. We weren't doing that before. Some of you may have seen Coffee with a Deputy. We've done that. We've done it in Cannon. Cannon Bells was just last week. It's a great event for us to get to know the community and unite citizens. So many more stories about that, but I'll leave that. That was my number one priority, and I know we've done that. Improve communications with the public. We now have a Facebook page we never had, and I know many of you are on Facebook. We have 13,000 followers. We are very transparent. We send out a weekly update of what we've been doing that week, so you know what we're doing. We're an open book, and we've made transparency part of our office, and I'm very proud of that. So check that one off the list.
30 seconds.
Okay, that's been 5 minutes already. Okay. Well, I'll touch on the other ones as we go. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Thank you. Those are many of the reasons I'm running.
Excellent.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Josh Hansen, a candidate for Goodhue County Sheriff. I bring to the table 22 years of military and law enforcement experience. I live in Red Wing with my wife and two girls, one in kindergarten now and one in 4th grade. So I'm not doing my full-time job. I'm doing overtime duty chasing those two around. A lot of reasons for running for sheriff as well. When the decision was first made, it was not a easy decision, and running any campaign, as a county sheriff knows and understands, there's a heavy lift, and there's consequences, and there's a huge amount of the sacrifice that goes into doing this. I was once told in my military service, if you're not happy with something, instead of complaining about it, and I'm softening up the language for the forum here, you need to move yourself into a position, and you need to stand up and make the changes. Get into a position where you can make the changes instead of complaining about it. So over the last, since 2009, I've been with the Sheriff's Office. I've paid attention to law enforcement. Before 2009, I was with the City of Kenny for 2 years. And before that, I was with the City of Goodhue for 2 years as Chief of Police. Before that, military. And I think my life kind of started right after high school, entered the military. Then 9/11 happened, as we all know. And then we recent events here with COVID and George Floyd. And I think law enforcement just turned into a new era where I truly believe that it's in trouble. I don't think it's a lost cause, but I think it requires strong leadership at the top to step up and lead the way forward. And I think it requires a new perspective, because the way we've been doing business for the last 30, 40 years, I think it just needs a good overhaul, at minimum, a good evaluation. The sheriff and I agree on a lot of things. There's a lot of things the sheriff and I don't agree on. And I personally feel that the areas that we disagree on are very critical to the future of law enforcement effort here in Goodhue County. And it's not just a local problem, but I think it's a national problem. We need better training, we need better standards, we need better emphasis on education, and we need to do a better job on taking care of our people. Another leadership trait that I learned was the more you take care of your people, the better they're going to accomplish the mission. And that is a trait that I hold close to my heart. And I perform with that every day of my professional career. You have to take care of your people, and they will take care of you. What I've noted in the last couple of years, and from my perspective, and from what I've heard and been told, is there's just a general distrust and just general perception of a lack of leadership from the top. With my 22 years in military and law enforcement experience, much of that in leadership positions, I'm going to bring that to the table. Strong leadership, emphasis on taking care of our people, emphasis on shifting the priorities to what's important and what's ultimately going to keep Goodhue County safe today and what's coming next in the future. Thank you.
Just keep the mic, Josh. All right, Josh, we'll start with you. The second question is, what do you see as county issues of concern, and how would you propose to address these issues?
All right, I'm a big picture thinker. We have to look at Goodhue County specifically, how we fit in the overall schematics of our region and even at the national level. Major issues, I'll look externally outside the office, mental health and drugs. I think we can take those two issues, and I think in a lot of areas they're tied hand in hand. In some cases they're not, but the general consensus, even talking to people, is that they are. And from my experience, I believe that where you find mental illness, you also find the drugs. The flow of methamphetamine and carfentanil into the country is a major issue right now. Just recent statistics, I believe, from last year, we're exceeding over 100,000 deaths in 2021 just from overdoses in the country. If we look at history, the Vietnam War, we lost 58,000 Americans, actually 58,200 in the entire duration of that war. In 1 year in this country, we're exceeding over 100,000 fatalities from overdoses. And it's a pretty clear pathway into the country, and why this is occurring is coming through the southern border, and Minnesota, for whatever reasons, which I don't fully understand yet, but it's an ongoing educational piece. Minnesota's a hub for this. We can look at the methamphetamine. The methamphetamine is coming across the southern border, and it's coming into Minnesota, and I can tell you that methamphetamine we have direct hubs right here in Goodhue County. That's a problem. While at the county level, the sheriff level, we can't fix the issues at the southern border, and that's not what we're here for. That's a different conversation. That's a different campaign. That's a different set of options for voters. But what we can do is understand the problem and understand that this is an issue, and understand that within that 100,000 Americans, that is impacting Goodhue County, and understand that the Twin Cities metropolitan area is where a lot of this is coming from, especially with the carfentanil and fentanyl. Currently, our drug effort is focused, we're part of the Southeast Minnesota Violent Crimes Task Force, VSAT. Currently, we're not gaining enough information intelligence, we're not tracking it close enough from the Twin Cities metropolitan area. My idea is we need to increase these efforts. Now, the sheriff has said that he's doubled the narcotics effort in Goodhue County. While there is some truth to that, what the other piece that's left out is the second narcotics investigator that was added is a rotating position. Coming from a business management standpoint, it's a very, very complex, a very intricate, specialized section. And by the time you get a person trained up in that position, they're rotating out again. So we're really not, we didn't really add anything really effective there. So to say that we've doubled our narcotics effort, I would disagree. The other issue that comes with the mental health and the drugs is human trafficking. And we have very little focus on human trafficking here in Goodhue County. Being between the Olmsted County, Rochester region, and Twin Cities, I promise you that it is here. We are dealing with some things from the cities, but that needs to be an increased effort on that. Mental health, we need to bring our stakeholders and our partners to the table, and we need to start figuring out solutions for our own backyard. We need to stop waiting for the federal government and the state and the regional resources to fix our problems here in our backyard here in Goodhue County. And that's going to take leadership. We got to bring in our health and human services. We need to train our deputies for the crisis response. And we need to look for short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions for the mental health crisis out there. It's gonna take a lot of work, but again, leadership that stands up and says that this is gonna be a dedicated effort, we can do that. Thank you.
Okay, those are the two areas that Josh and I agree with. The drug crisis, opiate crisis, and mental health. And to say there isn't leadership at our level, at my level, you're about to find out what we've been doing in the last 4 years. Josh was right. Goodhue County had 9 overdose deaths in 2021. That's a lot. We're down to 4 this year. And we had 4 the previous year. So there's so many things about our drug issues that we haven't taken care of, we're dealing with it. I have hired an extra narcotics investigator. And yes, it is a rotating position, but we also have to deal with retaining young staff, giving other people more opportunities in our office. And that was one thing I heard loud and clear in 2018. A few people get all the things. A few people get to do SWAT, dive, ERT. I'm changing that. I have a 4 seasons deputy that rotates every 3 years. What that does is gives people more education, so when they go back on the road, if I have a 3-year narcotics investigator going back on the road, that experience is unbelievable on how we can get drugs off of the streets, help people in crisis. I'm doing that for many of our extra duties. They are 3-year rotations now. In 10 years, you're gonna have the most educated police force around because of that. So that's the narcotics part of our investigators. Also, it's not just getting drugs off the streets. As we all know, the war on drugs is fought at home with us through education, treatment, recovery. 4 years ago, I wholeheartedly supported our drug courts, and I still do today. We got a grant, a $500,000 grant to start a drug court. We have several graduates now. We had a 1-year extension because in 2020, we didn't use some of our funds, and the feds gave us an opportunity to use those monies this next cycle in our year. But my story with drug court is this. We had a gal that was in our jail 3 years ago as an inmate. She started recovery, went to a drug court or a treatment court in Goodhue County, graduated. She's currently 39 months sober. About 6 months ago, she reached out to me. Marty, I see your ad in the paper for a detention deputy, which is a jailer. Would I qualify? I said, here's the disqualifiers, and she qualified. Well, I hired her. So she is now a productive member of my staff, a productive citizen, paying her taxes, has her children back. That is just one story. And that's where our war on drugs starts there, in recovery. But having 2 narcotics officers is gonna also help us get those drugs off the streets, because that's just as important. But more importantly is our treatment. Secondly, or thirdly, I started a DARE program in our Goodhue County. They started this year, 1 in Pine Island and 1 in Zumbrota. The reason we did it in those 2 is because we are contracted school resource officers for those 2 schools, and we began a DARE program for the children. And it also starts there, to have positive relationships with law enforcement and to teach them not just about drugs and alcohol, but about making good choices. We have to start. We haven't had that in Goodhue County for well over 20 years. Why? I have no idea. We have it now. And I'm very proud of that. And that's gonna pay dividends to all of us moving forward. Mental health is the other thing. Mental health for our citizens, how we respond, and for our staff. When I was elected sheriff in 2019, we had no officers trained in critical incident training. That's a 40-hour class to help us recognize what's going on out in the community, how we can help these people in crisis. 30 seconds. We have now 13 staff trained in critical incident training, and my goal is to have every one of our patrol deputies trained in that. That's where we start that process, and we've done that, and I'm very proud of that. So to say the leadership is not doing anything about these critical incidents, critical issues in the county, definitely false. Thank you.
Do you have a rebuttal on this?
Is there?
Well, let's wait till the end. We'll just keep going with our questions. We'll maybe at the end, we'll just keep that on track.
Well, the sheriff is,
He said stop.
Well, I'll give you a minute, and then you'll have a rebuttal too.
sheriff continues to refer to that there was no staff trained in critical incident training. 2 pieces of this. I'm not sure what critical incident training is, number 1, but if he's referring to crisis intervention team training, which is focused on mental health training for our officers and our deputies, That is still not true because we had, including myself, multiple deputies and officers trained in that throughout Goodhue County. The sheriff did not bring that into Goodhue County here. Thank you.
We can agree to disagree.
Okay, let's keep it right. Okay, next question is, what management style would you bring to Goodhue County if you're elected as Goodhue County Sheriff?
The question was what management style I would bring to as the sheriff. And in the last 4 years, my management style is I'm not going to ask my staff to do something I haven't done. I mentioned earlier that I've been in law enforcement for 5 decades. It's been 33 and a half years. But what I've done in those 33 and a half years is the most critical part of this. I've done, besides being a jailer, I've done every position in our office, in a sheriff's office, in a police department. I have been a SWAT team member. I've been a sergeant. I've been a field training officer. I've been a field training supervisor. In all those positions, you learn how to do the job. You know what to do. And the other part of this is in 2005, I believe, I had 5 kids in diapers and I needed to get a second job. Well, what fit my role was the medical examiner investigator. I was a medical examiner investigator for Dakota County and Goodhue County for 8 years. So working 2 jobs, but let me tell you, in that job and in our job, we see many, many things that you don't want to talk about. And I've been there, I've done that, I know what I've asked my staff to do. So it's, the leadership is, I won't do something, or I won't ask somebody to do something I wouldn't do. That's first and foremost. I'm gonna touch just a little bit on, because I started this again, I said, we see things that we don't necessarily wanna see, we don't wanna take it home. This mental health issue with our staff, I didn't touch on it because we were running out of time, but I'm gonna now. Our staff keeps these things inside. I tell a story that 30 years ago, they used to teach us how to put a gun on, teach us how to put a bulletproof vest on, the badge, but what they didn't teach us was how to take that off when we got home. We were supposed to be big, strong policemen and not worry about what you just saw. You're not worry about the baby you just pulled from a mom's arms. No, we do worry about that. And what I want to do is make sure these young guys, young gals that are starting the law enforcement in 2022 don't end up having the same issues that I have. I'm not going to lie. I'm not the same person I was in 1989 because of what we see. That's why I started a peer support program in Goodhue County for our staff. We have trained staff that are peer support. Our staff can go to them. But that was one of the things that I mentioned earlier. These programs, we know because it's documented, but it takes more than 2 years to get that type of program going. We need to get these staff members comfortable and asking a peer in confidentiality, talking to a peer about what they saw. The other thing we did, was start a chaplain program. We've never had a chaplain program in Goodhue County. Now I have 4 chaplains that are on call. They ride along with our staff. They can be called out to a scene. If we need to do a death notification, they will be there or to help us. More importantly, they're going to get to know our deputies. And then our deputies will be able to have another resource to talk about these issues, which is so important. Like I said, I don't want these new people to have the same issues that I have and have been dealing with for 34 years. I went off base, but that's where I'm at.
My leadership style really started in the military. So started out my career in military special operations, and there's no question that it's standards and leadership. And throughout my 11 years of military service, including time as a team leader, squad leader, and leading combat operations into Iraq, one thing I can say is leading from the front is powerful, leading by example, transparency, communication with your people, knowing your people. So when I'm asked what kind of leader I'll be transparent, and I'll have face time with my people, because having been in some of the worst situations of my life, one of the most reassuring things was just seeing the face of the person that I was supposed to be looking up to and following. And you can't replicate that with any email, any Facebook post, or anything similar to that. My law enforcement experience also carries with it leadership time. I was a field training officer. I was in charge of the onboarding process, the initial training with our deputies. I was a field training supervisor, so I was responsible for the overall oversight and supervisory function of that onboarding process. I was also a SWAT team leader and a SWAT team commander. And in all those circumstances, comes with it high risk, potentially high consequence, but mentoring and encouraging professional development, both on the clock and off the clock. I think those are key things. We have to embolden our people to invest in their careers, invest in the profession, and not all of that is going to be done on the clock. I was a patrol commander. I was third in charge of the sheriff's office, and that's where the sheriff and I worked most closely together. So I was responsible for the patrol division, and as well as recreational enforcement, our special teams, our canine team, our court, and our civil division, and transparency and just mentorship with the people. That's what I'm going to bring to the table as sheriff too. The higher you go up in the leadership hierarchy, the more likely it is to get disconnected. And once you get disconnected, it's really hard to reestablish those grounds again. And we as leaders, we have to make that a deliberate effort to make sure that doesn't happen. Thank you.
Okay, just remind everybody there's coffee and donuts in the back there. The bathrooms are out to your left. Okay, to the restaurant. Okay, our fourth question. Recruiting good officer candidates and retaining them is a priority within the sheriff's department. What are your personal thoughts on recruiting and the retention of good quality officers?
Yes, that's going to be an issue, whether it's a 10-year or 20-year problem. I can tell you that it is an issue, and it's not going to be a short-term issue that we're going to be dealing with. It's going to be for an extended period of time. The logical approach, when we understand the larger situation here, is that there is a declining candidate pool. Even the candidates that are out there, I would question some of the quality of them. And it takes a lot longer to sort through the process, and some of that isn't, some of those qualities aren't really going to be validated or confirmed until they're well through a field training process, which also costs taxpayers money and time and effort in the office, sorting through that. So a logical response to it is focusing on retention. Now, with retention, we have to make a quality work environment, and we have to make an attractive work environment to keep our employees. And when I talk about leadership and I talk about that environment, from my perspective and from what I have been told from staff, is they don't feel that there is reason to stay here, and I will explain that. Recently, I received a union endorsement as our local deputies 91 endorsement. It was a historic vote, 22-5. Now, contrary to what I've read publicly, it was not a political move. I interpret that as a group of people, at least 25 of them, that don't have confidence in their leadership at this point. Now, if we know that they don't have confidence in their leadership, and we know we have a declining candidate pool, and we know that it's hard to replace these cops, 22 of them is not going to be an easy fix going forward. We have to foster a healthy work environment where the people that are within the office believe that there's going to be opportunities for advancement. Yes, the sheriff believes in opportunities. How he's going about that, I disagree with. From my perspective and from what I've been told, there's been an emphasis on hiring externally and zero emphasis or very minimal emphasis on internal professional development of our people. Now, if we're just hiring from the outside and we're not professionally developing our own people internally, you can see where the perceptions that I'm being told about would come into play. Just kind of, our people here aren't good enough, so we're just gonna bring other people in to replace you. And that is perspective, and that's not coming from me, that's coming from our staff. We need to change that. Again, we need to take care of our people first, because the more we take care of our people, the better they will take care of you. Take care of your people, they will accomplish the mission. Thank you.
I mentioned earlier that we are working on retention because there's young staff out there that if they don't see any advancement, they're just gonna move on. And that's just the way of the world right now. What I've done recently, so we have many extra duty assignments. One being SWAT team, another being our dive team, another one being our K9. Now those take up a ton of time. We train once a month. And we have secondary assignments that are use of force training, firearms training, drone operator, many more. What I was told when I first got here is, and I mentioned it earlier, a couple people get everything. Tom was one of them that told me that. And what is true to that, and it came to light this year, I have a diver, a SWAT operator, a use of force operator, or trainer, and a firearms trainer who went out on shoulder surgery and he was out for 6 months. What does that do to a staff? What does that do to your extra duty assignments? What it does is take a SWAT operator out of commission. Also takes a diver out of commission. Also takes a use of force operator out of commission, and a trainer. There's too much for one person to do. And it also takes you off the road 16 plus hours a month. Josh talks about standards and training. I'm gonna address that right now. When I got there, Josh was a SWAT team commander, and he said, Marty, to meet national standards for a SWAT team, you need to train 2 days a month, 16 hours a month. I said, okay, let me do some research. At the time, we were paying everyone overtime. Everyone overtime to be on the team that trained that day, and we were also replacing those people on the road on overtime. It's still on my desk today. It costs us $4,200 a day to train. Josh wanted to do 16 hours, now do the math. That's almost $10,000 in overtime in a day, a month, and compound that by 12 months. It wasn't going to happen under my watch. It was wasteful spending. I said, you can still train, but you're gonna flex your time. If you're gonna train on a Wednesday, you're gonna take off on a Monday. The staff didn't like that. They still don't like it. That's part of the reason that they endorsed Josh, because we wanna train our SWAT team 16 hours a month at a cost of $10,000, and I'll bet you that overtime's coming back. We can't do that. When I got there, I cut our overtime budget by $100,000 just by doing that. That's all I did. We still got the training, and I'll touch on more training. When I say these three, K9, dive, SWAT are our most trained deputies. They train once a month for 8 hours. They train once a year. Our SWAT team gets 36 hours of training. It's a 40-hour week. Our dive team does a 2 or 3 day training for their certifications. I understand that. What that averages for a 3-year license cycle, our post license requires us to have 48 hours of training to renew our license. Per our training coordinator, he's a sergeant, I said, what is the average hours of training our deputies get in a 3-year cycle? And he said, that's 167 hours. We're only required to have 48. I said, okay, thank you. What about dive team, SWAT team, and all that? He goes, well, 8 hours times 12 times 3 times 100, or add 167 hours. If our dive team goes to every training And every yearly training, it's 521 hours of training a year, every 3 years. SWAT teams more, 563 hours of training. So don't tell me there's no standards or training. We are well trained. And K9, by the way, trains on duty all the time. They train, they go to trials. They probably have the most training. So they're well over 560 hours of training every 3 years. So we are doing that, but we're not paying them overtime to do that. And that's the important thing we need to hear here. I also didn't cut the training budget. Our training budget has gone up ever since I got here. I've also been over budget. In training 2 of my 3 years. The only budget I wasn't over is 2020 when no one was offering training anyway, including Josh's training. He couldn't be a certified emergency manager because he didn't offer the training. Sometimes you just can't have the training. Lastly, I'll quickly touch on the endorsement. Nobody probably knows this, but Josh Hansen's wife is a patrol deputy, was a lead union steward. His brother-in-law's on that union. So who wouldn't support their spouse? Who wouldn't endorse their spouse? I mean, that was ramrodded internally, and I'm not buying it.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Both of you.
3 hours in 3 years. That was use of force training for the Goodhue County Sheriff's Office. Only recently, we can bump that up to 9 hours in 3 years. High consequence, low frequency, high risk training to mitigate all the issues. One lawsuit for negligence, we shoot the wrong person, we can't properly de-escalate. We're gonna compare $10,000 to millions. I'll end it right there with that. We need to think bigger picture on that. The endorsement, bringing my wife, bringing my brother-in-law, my family into it, that's way oversimplifying the issue, Sheriff. Failure of leadership in your part, your people do not have confidence in you. Thank you.
Well, I've addressed all my failures, if you call them that. And I'll continue to fail our deputies the way I've been doing it, because it's the right thing to do. We're training them. Look, we have 105 employees in our office, by the way. 5 separate unions. 4 chose not to endorse at all. Now you're talking 20% maybe of my staff. Keep that in mind when you look at this endorsement. Also, 6 of those patrol deputies chose not to endorse either. So now, and 5 endorsed me. So that's 11. So that's half of the patrol union right there. And keep in mind, there's 105 employees in our office that are just happy with what we're doing.
That's not true either.
We'll stop.
Training now 22-year deputy sheriff. That's
Okay,
that's
everybody,
not
we will go to the audience now. If you would like to ask a question, raise your hand, I'll call on you. You can rise, state your name, probably where you live, Red Wing, Cannon Falls, or wherever, and ask your question. And then, as I asked before, no rebuttals from back and forth. Okay. So, we'll open up for questions for about 15 minutes. First question, anybody? No question. Yes, ma'am.
Cheryl Schwenfelder from Goodhue. Okay, one of you is gonna win. And when that happens, sir, would you mind grabbing her the mic? There's people that have hearing issues would like to know the question. Thank you.
Put it on the side here.
It's a good idea.
Okay, one of you is gonna win. And when that happens, whichever one it is, how are you going to solve the division that is in the unit? Because that's very important.
One of my most proudest accomplishments is when I ran in 2018 against Paul Gilau. That election was not on his part. It was contentious in different realms, and some of you may remember the story. But after the election and I won, I had a conversation with Paul, And I said, Paul, and he was the patrol major at the time. I said, Paul, you did a good job. You're doing a good job. This job is yours until you don't want it anymore. So and he helped, he said, I'm gonna stay and get you guys on your feet and I'll play it by ear. I'll see what I wanna do. I said, okay. And we had a great working relationship and I was so proud of that. What I'm more proud of now is he's actually supporting my campaign. And to me, that says a lot about one, our relationship, but how we can also get through some of the adversities that we had, if you will. I don't see anything changing in that regard for me. That's the way I do. I treat people how I want to be treated. And it's paid off. It's paid off for me in tenfold in the last 34 years, and longer, even in life. So that's my answer to that. Thank you.
We're gonna bring the team together, and I'm gonna stand in front of them, and we're gonna talk. It's that FaceTime I was talking about. And we're gonna lay out where the direction we're gonna go, and it's gonna be very defined with a mission statement and supporting objectives. And we're going to get everybody to move forward on those objectives. There's no doubt that not everyone would agree if I were to win. It's no different that if the sheriff were to win, not everyone's gonna agree with that. But the most important thing is the service to Goodhue County. And in focusing on that, we need to lay out the mission and the objectives and how we're gonna make sure Goodhue County is safe. And we, through communication and transparency, we'll have to work through the rest. It's not gonna be easy, not an easy button solution to that, but that's how we'll start.
Keep the mic. Okay, another question. Yes, sir. You want to come up? Yeah. State your name, where you're from.
So I'm Matt Belfer from Cannon Falls. Just wondering about the constitutional oath that Sheriff Mack has put forward. Are you guys familiar with it? Are you on board with being a constitutional sheriff? And I can just maybe read for those that are not familiar part of what that oath entails. It says to keep the peace and to secure, defend, and protect the people of this jurisdiction from threats to their liberties, their livelihoods, and the peaceable enjoyment of their property. The nature of that solemn oath requires that the actions of the sheriff and the performance of this duty must conform to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state.
Thank you for the question. I think it's important to understand the constitutional sheriff concept today. It's a very popular question out there, and I think it's important for everyone to understand the facts on that. Number one, the United States Constitution does not mention the word sheriff, and neither does the state constitution. The sheriff is a statutorily in Minnesota appointed position by statute, and closing the language of the law. As far as upholding the Constitution, I took an oath when I was 18, actually 17, because I entered military service prior to graduating high school. And I took another oath as law enforcement. And I can tell you that I believe in the Constitution of the United States, and I believe that that needs to be upheld, just as it was at age 18 for me, and just as it is for 41 for me now. It's a precious document, and having been to other places around the globe that doesn't have that document or has a document similar to it that has been tampered with, I can assure you that it is number one priority. Constitution. Thank you.
Of course, that's our goal, to protect people's rights. That's the number one reason we have law enforcement in the United States. And again, I took that oath 33 years ago, but I also administer that oath nearly weekly with our new staff. And it reminds me every time what I'm here to do, and that's to protect the citizens of our county, of our state, and any passers through. It's very important to do that. Again, it's as Josh said, all the amendments in the preamble do not mention the sheriff being the almighty, but we do have some power to have our staff do the right thing and protect the rights of citizens.
Any question? Anybody? I'd like to get different individuals if possible. Anybody?
John,
Yes, Bob.
Oh, I'll just, Bob Roll resident, Wanago Township. You see in the paper, you see in the news media that there's a shortage of law enforcement officers, trouble recruiting. What's the level that we have at Goodhue County? Are we adequately staffed or what's going on?
So I'll address a couple of those issues. I'm on the advisory board of Rochester Community Technical College as well as Southeastern Minnesota Tech College in Red Wing. And what we are finding is that the enrollment is down significantly. I would say 50% down from 2019. Between three technical colleges, Riverland, Winona State, and RCTC will be putting 35 students combined into the skills program this spring. I can tell you right now, the Rochester PD is probably down 30 officers, and they're gonna take them, and what does that leave for the rest of us, even in Goodhue County, if some of those kids wanna stay local? We're not gonna get them. We're sandwiched between Dakota County, Olmsted County. I can't pay them what those other counties can pay them. I mean, they could drive from Goodhue County to go to Olmsted and closer than our Red Wing at times. It's such a difficult situation. That's why we have to offer more incentives to be a Goodhue County deputy. That means, and I don't even think I finished my story about, remember I was talking about the dive team and the SWAT team. What I did was limit that to one of those top 3 priorities per deputy, which gives more opportunity for more staff. And that was very, very loud and clear when I got there, that we can't have one person doing 4 different jobs. I'm sorry, I didn't finish that story. But what we have now is that person's gonna have to pick from either dive or a SWAT team and give another younger person opportunity to do those, because they're telling me, there's nothing here for me. These guys have been on the SWAT team for 20 years. They're not gonna leave. I'm gonna go to Olmsted County. And we've had that. You done? I can't remember the rest of the question. Threw me off. Retention. Yeah, I discussed it both. I told you where we're at with clients or potential candidates and how we're dealing with retention. Thank you, Bob.
Yes, again, as it was addressed earlier, it's going to be an issue, and I think it's going to be a longer term issue than we might realize at this point. Outside the box recruiting, which I will give the sheriff credit in that he has been looking at a couple options there with the recruiting effort. Recruiting, however, doesn't work if there's not a candidate pool to draw from. So again, it brings it back to the retention. And before we have leadership that can be trusted again, we're not going to have a solid retention plan in place. I can tell you we've already lost deputies. We've lost one to Rochester. We've lost another one to another jurisdiction locally. And we got some retirements coming up. And now I'm hearing from what staff has been telling is our chief deputy is also leaving at this point. So if I want to look at leadership and I want to look at just the confidence at the top to retain staff, I think that is an issue that needs to be addressed. And I think it's just time for a leadership change to ensure that we keep the people that we do have. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Yes, ma'am. Want to come up?
I'm loud. Jeanne McDonald, I live in Cannon Falls. As a follow-up question to the gentleman, what are the current numbers for open staff positions, if you know them?
I'm not fully in the loop on the exact numbers, so I have to pass it on to the sheriff.
That was the part I forgot. Sorry, Bob. Currently, we are full staff on patrol. But we do have retirements in January coming up. I think I have one more bailiff that's going to go to Red Wing. So we are in the process of, we have an open applications for patrol deputy. We haven't struggled all that hard with our patrol deputy positions in the last few years, which I'm very grateful for. Because once you do hire somebody, it takes 4 months to get them on the road. So it does strain our staff, and it does take its toll. And we've had it since when I got here in 2019. We lost 305 years of experience. I spent 2019 hiring new people. It just is an extreme amount of work and time. Where we struggled, in 2020, I lost 8 deputies in the jail pre-COVID in March. And when that happened, we knew that the DOC was gonna shut down inmates. We had 30 of them at the time. I made a deal with the Department of Corrections to take 15 of those inmates back so we could shut a 60-bed unit down in our jail rather than having to try to hire 8 more staff in the wake of a pandemic, which never would have happened. And by the way, it still hasn't happened. We've had, oh boy, I think right now, to blatantly answer your question, we have 3 people in training. We don't consider them on staff yet. We are still down 7 detention deputies in our jail. And that has been since March of 2020. We had walk-in interviews. We've had an open interview process since 2020. We're just not getting the staff. And we're not alone. Malheur County is still 15 down in their jail. And even businesses, as you all know, if you're an employer, it's pretty hard to find staff. And we're working on it. We're going to Winona this week to a job fair. And those things never had to happen. When in 2019, we would have 30 or 40 applicants for a jail position and more for a patrol deputy position. That has since gone away, which is very unfortunate. So I don't know how that'll turn around. We just need to get the kids back in school. We need to develop those relationships in our schools as we're doing with DARE and community engagement. It all works in our favor, but now we're behind the 8 ball 2 or 3 years post George Floyd, and we just have to build that trust back up again. And we in Goodhue County, we are liked. When George Floyd happened, we would inevitably, and I and our deputies, thank you for your service, deputy. Thank you for your service, sheriff. They weren't getting that in Minneapolis or Brooklyn Center. We do, and we have a great community. We're very fortunate where we live, and we don't have the disruption here. We just gotta count our blessings. Thank you.
Josh, you see, cut your stuff short here. All right. One more question or maybe a couple. That's right. Want to come up and introduce yourself?
I'm fine. My name is Anna Sills, and I'm from Red Wing. And I do have a question. I know it says it's not mentioned in the Constitution that there is, the sheriffs, but the sheriff is the only elected position that people elect them, and of any of the people who enforce the law. So I'm just wondering how you're going to go ahead and say no when the federal government comes in and says you have to close down your schools, you've got to do this, you have to do that, you have to, businesses and that. How are you going to support the Constitution so that our freedoms are not being continually eroded away?
Well, I think we've seen a recent example of what you're speaking about during COVID. Me personally, if history repeats itself, which we know history repeats itself, right? If executive orders were to come down and they're going to close churches and they're going to close businesses, me and my staff, we're not going to entertain that. Simple.
Well, I was the sheriff during the pandemic, and our directive was to, when we get a call, and we got several, and this person's having a wedding. We document, we respond, we document, and we inform. That was our directive, and that was all under Josh's jurisdiction at the time. And that's what we decided to do, and that worked very well. We didn't shut down weddings. we might have called the owner and said, we had a complaint that you're having a wedding. We just want you to be aware of that. We didn't go into churches and shut churches down. We were never the mask patrol, ever, nor will we ever be a mask patrol. And that was our stance. I think both of us agree on that.
One more.
Cal Bean, Kenyon. Kenyon is the furthest point from Red Wing. My parents, well, they were alive, lived in Cannon Falls Township. They have a welfare check on them, took somebody from Red Wing coming up to Highview to check on them. Our Kenyon Police Department only has part-time coverage for on duty. The rest of it is by the sheriff's office. What are you gonna do for the parts of the county for coverage that are not in Red Wing?
So currently we have, for the lack of a better word, a district for our deputies. They come on and they know what section of the county that they're going to. We have an east, we have a west, which would be Kenyon area. We have Pine Island and we have Wanamingo. And the reason we have Pine Island and Wanamingo is because we contract with those folks for coverage. And then we have a float car that can pretty much go anywhere. But if someone calls for a backup or even a call when a part-timer is not in Kenyon, our west car responds, probably, likely, along with our float car. Float car, yes, could be in Lake City, right? That's a long haul. We have 700 plus square miles in our county. At times, we just can't get there. And unfortunately, we do have, we would have a person sectored in the west, which would be a quicker response. But keep in mind, if they're at a fatal motor vehicle crash on 52, they're not gonna get to your parents anytime soon either. So thank God for our first responders and our volunteers that oftentimes lead us to scenes like that. So we're very grateful for our partners there.
Yeah, I would agree with what the sheriff is saying there, and I would add, City of Kenyon does have a full-time police department, and we have a strong partnership with the City of Kenyon. Although it's, they're not always on 24 hours a day, they struggle with staffing too, just like everybody else does. And in these smaller agencies, it's more impactful. There's more of an impact with that. They have a hard time covering a shift or whatever. So the county will backfill and help out with that. What you're describing about the Kenyon area and the townships down in the southwest portion of the county, that's not a new complaint or observation. We looking at kind of larger picture on it. I would like to look at more of a sector-based, more of a community integrated-based approach on policing at some point in Goodhue County, where we have we go in line with commissioner districts or whatever it might be. We more focus on certain areas on that, where we as a sheriff office would come in and work a little closer with City of Kenyon or Zagorda or Pine Island, which are already contract towns, even Red Wing in that case. However, that would require additional staffing. And if we look at the situation right now, especially with the economy, I think we can also safely say that we're probably looking at an economic downturn at some point in the future, in the near future. And just asking for additional staff is always a huge lift, and the sheriff and I would agree on that. And all of us are taxpayers, so we want to make sure that we're doing the most, getting the best bang for the buck on our staffing efficiency-wise. So I guess in short, yes, the southwest portion of the county, as you're describing, it's on the radar. It's on both of our radars with that. And I think just keeping on the radar and doing what we can to help get a little bit more visibility down there is the best approach.
Okay, we're gonna terminate the questions now. Each of the candidates will close your statement. John, I'll start with you, whatever you'd like to say in closing here today.
Well, I appreciate everybody showing up today and taking the time to kind of look into this. Out on campaign trail, talking to people, door knocking, what I can say about this election and just outside of what the sheriff race is, I think people are paying attention to their local races this year. I can't count the number of people that I've met, even in their mid-30s, even 40s, that have never voted before. And what they're telling me is they're going to vote this year. And I think that's a good thing, just from like the national standpoint, because I think this reflects like the concerns we have across the country, and the buy-in us as citizens are starting to take up, and our civil responsibilities. So with that, with me, public safety is a big for me. It's an important thing for me. My girls, my wife, they're part of the community. My girls go to Red Wing schools, and the safety and security of them and their friends and family and all your communities, and tied with a lot of people, whether it be Canada Falls or Pine Islands or Broda. Public safety means something to me. And what I can promise you as your next sheriff, public safety will be a priority, and we're going to stay focused on that. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, John, for moderating. Every time I talk about the things we've done, it rejuvenates me, knowing that we haven't sat on our heels for the last 4 years. And I think one of the reasons is that I do have this on my desk, and I'm going to have my next one on my desk as well, to continue to remind me that we have work to do. And again, like I told you, I'm not done with what we've started. It's important for follow through, and it's important for our staff. I currently have a application for a federal grant to get mental health, in addition to what we've already done, peer support, chaplain program. What we've done it's called Check Up from the Neck Up. And it's just a visit with a psychologist, but it's expensive. I've requested a $60,000 grant from the federal government to be able to implement this program, where a deputy would meet with a psychologist or a therapist once a year, or up to 5 or 6 times a year. They don't have to talk about work, they can talk about fishing. It's important to build that relationship. It's the start of, and I talk about narcotics and alcohol addiction. Being able to talk about it and recognize that you have a problem. This grant, and if I don't get this grant, by the way, I've already put it in my budget for 2023 for $60,000 for mental health for our staff. So that's how important it is for me. I know Josh doesn't like it when I get grants necessarily. He doesn't want to wait for the federal government. But I have an obligation to 48,000 citizens. I'm not just a steward of 105 people. I'm a steward of 48,000. And I'm very proud to say that I have reduced, we've been under budget by $1.9 million in the last 3 years alone. And that's just, and again, a lot of it is not being able to hire staff, because we budget for those staffing. We can't fill them. Yes, that makes our budget look better. But I'll tell you, one of my proudest things is actually taking some of that overtime away and putting it towards this training, because we have increased training like I addressed it. So I'm in for the long haul. I appreciate you guys being here. I do have flyers in the back. My phone number's there. That's my personal cell. Feel free to call. And again, appreciate TRIAD. I've loved our meetings.
Okay, I think they did an excellent job, don't you, folks? Let's give them that. And I'm sure they'll be willing to visit with you after, so hang around if you'd like to visit with them. Thank you, Josh and Marty, for coming. We appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah.